Most people think generative AI gives generic or mediocre answers. The truth is simpler. Vague prompts produce vague results. When you open a tool like ChatGPT, you're greeted by a blinking cursor, ready to respond to anything you type. The answers you get will usually be fine. But with just a little structure, they can be dramatically better. The key to getting the most out of generative AI isn't knowing which button to click. It's knowing how to ask the question. Today, I want to show you a simple, practical way to do that. Great prompts consistently answer a few basic questions. Who? What? Where and when? How? For whom? And one final question, why? That last one is actually for you, not the AI. Let's walk through each one. First, who? This is the most important part of any prompt. Generative AI doesn't automatically know what perspective to take. You have to tell it who it's supposed to be. A helpful way to think about this is to ask yourself, if I could ask a real expert this question, who would that be? For example, you are a professor of economics with 20 years of experience. You are a software developer. You are a philosopher. If you ask each of those personas to write about the same topic, you'll get very different answers. Not because the topic changed, but because the perspective did. That's not magic. That's context. Here's a helpful mental model. Imagine you hand a bowl of fruit to different professionals. A chef might make a fruit salad. An artist might paint a still life. A nutritionist might analyze the vitamins. Same ingredients. Completely different outcomes. Generative artificial intelligence works the same way. Persona determines output. Now, let's look at what. This is about being explicit, about the task you want to accomplish. What? This is the crux of what you want ChatGPT to do for you. ChatGPT is not a mind reader. It doesn't know your goal, unless you clearly state it. Generative AI is capable of many different types of work. For example, it can write new content, rewrite or improve existing content, continue writing something you've already started, create outlines or structured plans, synthesize and summarize information, generate code, provide counter-arguments, and brainstorm ideas, create images, videos, music, and analyze data. The possibilities are vast. But here's the important part. Help focus ChatGPT so that it can maximize its awesomeness by telling it what you want it to do. If you don't tell it what kind of work you want, it will guess. And guessing usually leads to generic output. Great prompting means being explicit about the task you're assigning. Instead of assuming intent, say it plainly. Are you asking it to write, edit, summarize, compare, brainstorm? When you clearly define the what. ChatGPT stops behaving like a general chatbot and starts behaving like a focused collaborator. Now let's talk about where and when. Where and when are not needed in every prompt, but when you're creating content for a specific location or moment, they become extremely important. Think about it this way. The same message sounds very different depending on where it's used. A social media post is written very differently than trade show literature. An internal email sounds different than a public press release. ChatGPT needs that context to adjust tone, length, and structure. Let's look at a simple example. First, you tell ChatGPT who it is. You are an expert copywriter with over 10 years of experience. Next, you tell it what to do. Write 2 versions of copy for our company's new outdoor house paint that lasts 30% longer than other paints. Now you add where the copy will be used. The first version is for social media and should be under 280 characters. The second version will be used at a trade show. By including where the content will live, you get 2 very different and much more useful results from the same prompt. Now let's talk about why. And this one is a little different. Providing a why statement is often more beneficial for you than for ChatGPT. In fact, you don't always need to include the why in the prompt itself, but you should always pause and think about it. Why are you asking ChatGPT to do this task? What problem are you actually trying to solve? And is ChatGPT the best solution for that problem? Generative AI is very good at accelerating certain kinds of work. Drafting, summarizing, brainstorming, restructuring ideas, but it is not equally good at everything. It does not understand consequences. It does not know context you haven't provided. And it does not replace human judgment. When you skip the why, it's easy to use AI when you don't need it. Accept output uncritically, or create content that looks polished but lacks intention. Thinking about why helps you decide whether I should help at all. What parts of the task should stay human? And what success actually looks like for this output. Good prompting isn't about outsourcing thinking. It's about being intentional about where AI adds value and where it doesn't. And here's a simple check you can use every time. Ask yourself, am I using ChatGPT to think less or to think better, faster? Now let's talk about how. This is where you design the output. Before you even think about the content, pause and think about how you want the result delivered. This is where many people stop short with generative AI. They tell ChatGPT what they want, but not how they want it presented. When you prompt ChatGPT, you can be explicit about how the output should look. You can control the format, the structure, the length, and the level of detail. For example, let's say you want ChatGPT to help rewrite a paragraph you've already written. Many people don't realize that ChatGPT can output information in structured formats like tables. Here's what that might look like. Rewrite this paragraph, then insert your paragraph here. Then tell ChatGPT. For the output, create 2 columns that show the original paragraph and the revised paragraph side by side. By telling ChatGPT how to present the output, you make it easier to evaluate, compare, and decide what to use. This turns ChatGPT from a text generator into a practical editing tool. Now let's talk about for whom. This is our last section, and perhaps the most important one. You are not always writing for yourself. In fact, most of the time, you're writing for someone else, a specific audience, group, or segment. And this is where many people go wrong with generative AI. They focus on what they want to say, but forget who they're saying it to. As we saw in the house paint example, the same message sounds very different depending on the audience. We communicate differently with investors, employees, customers, the public, and children. When ChatGPT helps you author content, it needs to know who the message is for in order to adjust tone, framing, and emphasis. This is where all the earlier pieces come together. Let's look at a full example. You tell ChatGPT who it is. You are a chief communications officer with over 20 years of experience. You tell it what to do. Our company is expanding by launching a second headquarters in London. Write 2 communications about this. You define for whom, The first communication is for investors. The second communication is for employees. You add when and where. Both will be released on July 1st. The investor communication will be a press release. The employee communication will be an internal email. You clarify why. We want to inspire investors with the growth of the company. We want employees to understand there will be new opportunities for them. And finally, you specify how. The investor communication should not exceed 500 words. The employee communication should not exceed 300 words. Output both communications side by side in a table. Same announcement, same facts. But two very different messages because the audience is different. When you clearly define for whom, ChatGPT stops producing generic content and starts producing communication that actually fits the moment. So let's wrap this up. Great prompting isn't about finding clever tricks or perfect wording. It's about being intentional. When you use generative AI effectively, you're answering a few simple questions. Who should the AI be? What do you want it to do? Where and when will this be used? How should the output look? Who is this for? And why are you using AI for this task at all? When you do that, ChatGPT stops feeling random. It stops feeling generic. And it starts feeling like a thoughtful collaborator. Good prompting doesn't replace human thinking. It strengthens it. And that's the real power of generative artificial intelligence.